There are all these iconic holes on the back nine of Augusta National, but maybe the most interesting one happens all the way over here, on the other side of the course. It's this one, the third hole. It's one of the few holes at Augusta National that's never been lengthened or really changed that much at all. As everything around it has changed, this is a classic that stood the test of time. And for all the incredible shots that Rory McIlroy hit during the final round of his 2025 Masters win, the one through the trees on 7, or around the tree on 15, or his approaches into 17 and 18, he said that it was this chip shot here on the third hole that day that was his best one of the round.
But I think one of the most important ones for me was the second shot on 3.
And what makes this hole so interesting is that it creates a genuine strategic divide about what the best way is to play it. One that pits tour players against their own analytics guys, and one that sparked a heated social media debate between some pretty high-profile figures in golf. 8 of the last 9 Masters winners have birdied this hole during the final round, and they all did it in different ways. And what's cool is that underneath all of this is a strategy that the rest of us can learn from. The strategy of knowing when to push driver off the tee and when the data says to lay back. Because yes, there are good and bad times to do both. So in this video, I want to use this hole to understand the key scenarios for each of those things. We're going to pull numbers to explain why and when pros use each of these different game plans, why it causes issues specifically on this hole, and how the rest of us can use it for our own games. Alright, so this is the third hole at Augusta National. It's about 350 yards, which means on paper, it's drivable. But almost nobody ever manages to hit this green in one, both because the slopes on the surface are crazy, and also because the green itself is elevated, like 30 feet in the air. There are also these 4 bunkers placed strategically between 230 and 280 yards off the tee. And notice how the fairway over here pinches in. That's going to be important, so remember that. Most times, pros just bash a driver into this area right here, which is fine 75% of the time. But when the pin is tucked on this tiny shelf on the left, that's when things get juicy from a strategy perspective. That's where the pin was on Sunday at the 2025 Masters, tucked left. 11 paces on and just 5 paces from the left edge. Justin Rose, who finished runner-up, and Bryson DeChambeau, who was actually leading at the time he played the third, both laid back off the tee with different clubs to different yardages. Rory, who of course went on to win, hit driver. Though interestingly, he hasn't always hit driver on this hole. But because Rory ended up winning the green jacket, let's start with him, with some basic when to push driver scenarios. When it comes to the basics of knowing when to push driver and when to lay back, Scott Fawcett, the founder of Decade Golf, has a great system for this. It's inspired by the work of Mark Brody. We talk about Scott a lot in these videos, and for good reason. He's a really smart guy. We got into this more in this video here, but here's a quick recap of his push driver decision tree. For tour players, 95% of their average length drives finish within about 65 to 70 yards of their target. Those are their bucket 1 and bucket 2 shots, by the way, as we talked about last time. The 68% of shots in bucket 1 are within about half of that distance, so like 35 yards. For 3 to 10 handicaps, it's more like 80 yards and 40 yards, but at a shorter average driving distance. So yes, it's actually a lot less accurate compared to the pros than it sounds. These are all kind of ballpark numbers, by the way. We're keeping it general. Scott's system says to forget the rough. Just look for how big the gap is between penalty hazards, the actually bad stuff. If that gap is about the same size or bigger than your bucket 1 and bucket 2 left-right dispersions, you're fully in the push driver zone. If the gap is getting closer to your bucket 1 dispersion, that's a scenario when you should lay back. And specifically to the club where the space fits the gap of your bucket 1 and bucket 2 shots. A quick note here is that some interesting findings recently have shown that players only hit their 3-woods like 3% straighter than their driver. So if you're going to lay back because it's dangerous, 3-wood is kind of the worst of both worlds. You're usually better off laying up with a hybrid or something. Now usually there are obstacles in the way, probably bunkers, and often these bunkers form little bottlenecks. Scott says that if the far edge of the bunker is shorter than your average driver carry distance, that's a push scenario. For reference, this is some data from Arcos, which shows average driving distances across age and handicap levels. Screenshot this if you need. If you can't carry the bottleneck, now it's a layback scenario. But when you do layback, you want to pick a club where your maximum distance ends short of the bottleneck. Now, there's truly no point in trying to get aggressive when you're laying back. Remember that the goal of laying back isn't to thread the needle, it's to guarantee that you will end up short. Anyway, this system is why Scott is so vehemently on team push driver at the third hole at Augusta National, because it kind of checks all of his boxes. Most players can carry these last bunkers at 280 yards with their driver. And if you take a spot about 40 yards short of the green, where lots of these drives end up, it's about 83 yards wide between the trees. It's a standard send driver scenario, even when the pin is on the left, which is what Rory did that Sunday. And Scott believes this so passionately that he even got in a really heated social media debate with commentator Colt Knost about this a few years ago, after Colt said that he thought the smart play was laying back.
The most important thing is, and this is where I got in the argument with Colt Knost a couple of years ago, is he was saying, I don't understand why these guys aren't just laying up to 100 and having a nice stock wedge in. Well, at 100 yards, it's 27 yards between the bunker and over to the edge of the fairway, actually into the rough, which is a big problem. It's 24 yards from the bunker to the edge of the fairway, but to where you won't actually be blocked out by trees is 27 yards. On a par 3 on the PGA Tour, and it's 250 to that distance. A par 3 on the PGA Tour that's 250 yards, the shot pattern is going to be 50 yards wide.
All right, so now you're probably asking, well, if this is so simple, what's so interesting about this hole? Why are we even talking about this? Well, it's because it's not that simple, and it is that interesting. And it's all because of this area right here. It acts as a little black hole. So you see all these areas are a pretty deep shade of green, which means pros are averaging closer to 3 when they hit their tee shots into these zones. All except for this area, just short left of the green. Players who hit their driver into here, closer to the green than all these other zones, average about a full shot higher. The reason why is because this area here is at the bottom of a pretty steep valley. And that matters because it makes the chip shot not just really weird, but really difficult. If you watched this game plan video, we talked about how pros calculate yardages, and you may remember from it the 1-to-1 rule, which is important for when you navigate slopes. It's really simple. For every 1 yard that you're going uphill, you lose 1 yard of carry distance on your shots, but you gain 1 yard of roll. It's the opposite if you're going downhill. Now, as we mentioned earlier, this green on the third hole is like 30 feet or 10 yards up in the air from its lowest point. That means that on a standard shot, you're losing 10 yards of carry, but gaining 10 yards of roll. And honestly, probably even more because of how fast Augusta keeps its greens. We talked about effective green sizes in last year's Augusta game plan video, but all of these areas, the ones in pink and orange, your ball isn't going to stop here. Which means that when the pin is left, pros have to try to get their ball to stop in this tiny little green area, while the ball is going to naturally want to come in low and hot with roll. And low runners are literally the last thing that pros want on this shot, because remember, they're already really close to the green, somewhere between 30 and 50 yards. So if you're talking about adding 10 yards more of roll on a shot that's only 30 yards, you're just going to run out of space. It's less of an issue when the pin is over to the right, but when it's squirreled away on the left, the margins just start getting really thin. It's why pros who get it wrong here end up in the nightmare scenario of playing ping pong on this hole, chipping it long and then long again and then long again, because they simply can't get the ball to stop. This is exactly what happened to Gordon Sargent when he was an amateur playing the Masters in 2023. He drove it right near the green, but kept chipping his ball back over the green. He couldn't get it to stop, and he ended up making a triple bogey. So in order to stop the ball on this green to this pin, pros need to hit one of the most difficult shots in golf. From the short-sided position, and no, this isn't a pretend penalty, they need to launch it really high, and they need to ramp up the spin really aggressively, and they need to do it all from short range. For reference, here's some range data from the 2025 Players' Championship, which shows what a nice, normal, boring pitch shot with a wedge from about 40 yards looks like. It goes about 20 feet in the air, 5,000 RPMs of spin, and has about 40 degrees of landing angle. But in order to get the ball to stop on this green, pros need to dial up that spin to about 8,000 RPMs. and they need to bring the landing angle down much steeper, to something in the 50-degree range, because that's kind of what it's going to take to get this ball to stop on this green. Now, what I've described is a really aggressive, cool, nippy, saucy, high pitch shot. Think about the amazing pitch shot that Rory hit at the Ryder Cup in Rome, or this one from Tiger here. This is what we're talking about. This is really tricky to do, and that's why pros so often lay up here. Because instead of having to hit a really tricky, specialized, inconsistent pitch shot with the fear of playing ping pong, they lay back to like 80 yards, just like Justin Rose did. Or 120 yards, which is what Bryson did that day. And now, look at those same launch and spin numbers for pros on shots from those distances. The spin, it's right between 7,000 and 9,000 RPMs. The landing angle, it's about 50 degrees. They can hit a normal wedge shot, the kind they've hit a million times before, right into the middle of this green. And they know that if they hit it right, it's going to stick and then ride the slope towards the hole. And that's exactly what Jake Knapp did when he played this hole to this location a few years ago. Despite being one of the longest hitters on tour, Jake laid back to give himself a nice, boring, full wedge shot instead of that tricky pitch. And it turned out pretty well.
I mean, three's a good example. Like my first time playing there in the last round, the pin was on the left side. And a lot of guys, because it's a tough-ish wedge. I mean, it's a tough pin in general. And so, you know, a lot of the guys lay back and they hit wedge out to the right and it kind of follows the slope and gets down there as long as your distance is right. Whereas you see guys kind of just blow driver up there, and it's a tough chip shot. You have to hit it perfect. Sometimes they leave it short. Sometimes they kind of blow it over the green. And I laid up that hole and hit a great wedge shot and ended up going in. So I was like, all right, I guess I'll be laying up to this pin location from now on.
Now the downside here is that you're not going to be as accurate with a full wedge or a partial short iron as you would be with a shorter pitch shot. According to Arcos, from 100 yards, pros' average shots miss 4 yards left or right of their target, and about 7 yards long or short. For 5 handicaps, it's more like 8 yards left and right, and 13 yards long or short. And those misses mean a bad shot can still miss the green, and you'll end up with that difficult chip shot that you were trying to avoid in the first place. And besides, laying back to 100 yards at all means you're kind of threading the needle off the tee. You've got about 35 yards from bunker to rough and about 45 yards from bunker to pine straw. That is right on the edge, accuracy-wise, of where pros hit most of their shots from this distance. Now, the way pros rationalize this layback strategy is that they say they're going to have to hit one easy shot and one tricky shot either way, either off the tee or around the green. So they just end up picking the tricky shot they're most comfortable with. But the fact that there are decent arguments to both sides is kind of the genius in the design of Augusta National's third hole. Because this hole exposes exactly where the push or lay back off the tee scenarios get the most messy. Now, Cory Jez, the founder of Tour IQ, who you probably remember from our last video, explains when the pin is in a really inaccessible spot, it can turn push scenarios into layback scenarios. That's because when the pin is so hard to get to, whether you've got a wedge or a 9-iron, nobody's getting close to it anyway. They're all bailing out to the same spot.
Take the inverse, which would be like a crazy putt-putt style volcano. And it doesn't matter if you give me a 30-yard wedge, I'm still not going to get it to sit on top of the volcano, and I'm going to hit it to the same collection area as the guy who hit 4-iron into the green, for example, right? And so there would be literally zero benefit to taking on any additional risk off that tee. Now, obviously, every hole sits somewhere in the middle of that, but as a principle, we would say when you get those really crazy pin positions, that's very hard to hit a wedge close to, then that's one characteristic we see of times when it's just not worth it to push it off the tee.
Putting Augusta National aside for a moment, the 6th hole at TPC San Antonio is a great example that Cory often points to.
This is a long iron, Gary. This is very conservative.
The back left pin is on such a huge shelf that's so hard to get to that almost nobody ever tries to chase it. Short-sighted here is not a pretend penalty, so everyone just tries to bail out to the middle of the screen. Whether you hit a driver more than 320 yards in the fairway or lay 30 yards further back with a 3-wood essentially doesn't matter. The scoring average is almost identical for each of those tee shots. The takeaway here is that when flirting with the pin is an absolute no-go, even with a wedge in your hands, there's a good chance that laying back a little further off the tee just won't really hurt you. But when the green is flatter and the hole is more accessible because it's only guarded by pretend penalties, that's when there's a huge benefit to pushing driver further down the hole. You get more benefit the closer you are because there are no bailouts in this hole.
With this hole location today in the middle of the green, he's got a lot of space to work with.
It's a shootout, and the closer you are, the more aggressively you can get to this pin. Cory says to look at Wiley's 12th hole. There's a hazard on the right, it bottlenecks. On paper, this could be a layback scenario, but the green itself is so simple, and the pins are so accessible that it turns this hole into a push driver scenario. In short, Cory says that the difficulty of the hole location plays a key role in knowing when to push and when to lay back, which is why you see alternate strategies pop up on the third hole. Off the tee, all the signals flash that you should push driver. But then around the green, when the pin is on that tight shelf on the left, the signals start getting confused. Now they're flashing that maybe this is actually a layback scenario. All the cold hard numbers say that you should probably hit driver here, hope you don't accidentally hit it too close to the green, and then just take your chances with that tricky wedge shot. But the thing is, golf isn't played solely with cold hard numbers. It's played by pairing these unfeeling numbers with the emotions of the moment. Picking a strategy that not just makes sense on paper, but one that you can actually feel confident enough in to execute in the real world. And when you do that, whatever path you choose, there's only one thing waiting for you at the very end. Hello everyone, and thank you for watching another episode of Golf Digest's The Game Plan. As always, please like and subscribe and share so the channel can keep growing. And again, thank you, because you guys, you really are the smartest and best golf audience around. All right, so a quick housekeeping note is that I heard you guys loud and clear. So the next game plan episode after this is going to be about chipping strategies. We're going to launch it just before the PGA Championship, so keep an eye out. Any other ideas you want to see me do, just let me know in the comments. And if not, I've got lots more planned, so get excited about those. Anyway, play well, and I'll see you again soon.